Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into brain fog after COVID-19. We've gotten a lot of questions about this lately, and we've got some fascinating research from Acta Neuropathologica to help us unpack it all.
Yeah, it's cutting edge stuff. They're using this really advanced imaging technology, and they're looking at actual brain tissue from people who had COVID.
Okay, so what are they seeing? What's going on in there?
Well, one of the biggest things that jumped out, at least to me, was the inflammation.
Inflammation, right. That seems to be the big scary word whenever we're talking about COVID and long-term effects.
It is. And the thing is, they're finding these signs of inflammation in the brain even months after someone's recovered from the initial infection.
Months. Wow, so we're not talking about a couple of days here. This is long after the virus itself is gone.
Right, exactly. And it gets even more interesting. This inflammation isn't just everywhere. It seems to be centered around these cells called microglia.
Microglia, okay. Now, to be honest, I don't know a lot about brain cells. What are these microglia up to?
So think of microglia like the brain's own little immune cells, right? Like tiny little guards that are always patrolling, making sure everything's running smoothly.
So in a healthy brain, they're just kind of keeping things in check, like little guardians.
Exactly. But in the brains of people who had recovered from COVID, these microglia were acting a little strange. Instead of their usual patrols, they were all clumped together in these unusual patterns. The researchers called them nodules.
Nodules, okay. So these nodules are like a sign that something is off. What's so intriguing about these microglia gatherings?
It's like they were stuck in fight mode, even though the initial threat of the virus was gone. Like they were still prepared for a battle that was already over.
So they're still on high alert, even though the danger has passed.
Exactly. And the way we know this is they're sending out all these distress signals, these markers, like CD11C and CD68, that are classic signs of inflammation and activation.
Wow, it's like they're raising the alarm, even though everything is clear. That can't be good, right?
Right, and this is where things start to get really interesting because the researchers didn't stop there. They wanted to understand this process, so they compared the brains of people who'd recovered from COVID to people who, unfortunately, died during that acute phase of the infection.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Compare the aftermath, so to speak, with what's happening during the thick of it. So what did they find when they contrasted those different phases?
So, in the brains of those who didn't survive that initial infection, right? During that acute phase, there were tons of these T cells. They were everywhere.
T cells, right? Like those are the big guns, right? The immune system special forces.
Exactly. They're trained to target very specific threats, and they go after them aggressively.
But what about in the brains of those who had recovered? Were the T cells still ramped up?
Well, that's the thing. In that group, the T cell presence was way down. Like they had done their job, neutralized the virus and moved on.
Okay, so if the T cells aren't causing the problems we're seeing after recovery, what is? Are the microglia still freaking out even though the T cells have moved on?
That's the big question. And the research seems to suggest that those microglia, with their little army camps and all those distress signals, they might be the ones driving this whole chronic inflammation thing.
It's like the virus set off the alarm. And even though the danger is gone, the alarm's still blaring. But isn't inflammation like a normal part of healing?
Right. You need inflammation. It's like, your body's way of cleaning up a wound. Right. But the problem is when it becomes chronic, when it just doesn't stop.
So instead of a wound healing cleanly, it's like it stays red and irritated, even after the initial injury is gone. And in the brain, that's when we start to see problems with thinking and memory and all of that.
Exactly. And that's why this research is so important. It gives us a possible target for treatment. If we can find a way to calm those microglia down, to dial back that chronic inflammation, we might be able to help people who are struggling with these long-term effects.
So we need to find a way to hit the silence button on that alarm. I like that. So we've been talking a lot about the brain, but we know COVID affects the whole body. Is it possible that what we're seeing in the brain is actually part of a bigger picture, like something going on with the immune system as a whole?
It's a great question. And it's something researchers are really looking into because, yeah, there is this idea out there that COVID might be causing what we call immune dysregulation.
Immune dysregulation, so like the immune system gets thrown out of whack.
Exactly. It's like the immune system gets all these mixed signals while it's fighting off the virus. And even after the virus is gone, it can't quite get back to its normal balanced state.
So it's not just the brain that's affected, it's like the whole immune system is a little bit confused.
In a way, yeah. And that could definitely be contributing to the problems we're seeing in the brain. It's all connected.
So we have these overactive microglia in the brain, possibly a confused immune system that can't quite get its act together. What else are we learning about this whole brain fog mystery? What other avenues are researchers exploring? This is also interesting, but I imagine it can be kind of scary, if you're actually dealing with brain fog. Like,
Yeah.
we're throwing around all these terms, microglia, T cells, but what does it all mean for the average person who's just trying to get through their day and their brain's not cooperating?
Oh, absolutely. And I hear that a lot from patients. It's incredibly frustrating. And for a lot of people, it's really scary because there's still so much we don't know.
Right, it's that unknown factor that makes it even worse.
Hmm.
So what do you tell those patients? What can they do while we're waiting for more answers and hopefully better treatments?
Well, first and foremost, I always want to reassure them that they're not alone in this. There are millions of people dealing with this, and there are so many brilliant people out there working on this problem.
That's got to be reassuring to hear, at least, that you're not the only one. But in terms of actual, things you can do, what seems to be helping people?
Well, there's no magic bullet, unfortunately, and everyone's different, right? So it's important to talk to your doctor, see what they recommend. But, a lot of what we're talking about is helping the body kind of reset itself after this major disruption.
Reset. Okay, so what does that look like?
Well, a lot of it comes down to the basics,
Mhm.
actually. Getting enough sleep, managing stress, eating a healthy diet, exercising regularly.
So all those things we know we should be doing anyway.
Exactly. But they're even more crucial when your body's trying to recover from something like COVID, when your immune system is struggling to find its balance again.
It's like creating a supportive environment for your brain to heal, right?
Yeah,
Giving it the best possible chance to recover.
precisely. Now, we were talking earlier about microglia and T cells and all of that, but there's another type of brain cell that I think is really interesting in all of this, and that's astrocytes.
Astrocytes. Okay, now those weren't on my radar before. What do those guys do?
So astrocytes are kind of like the unsung heroes of the brain, right? They do a little bit of everything. They help support neurons, make sure they have the nutrients they need, clean up waste products, help repair damage. They're really essential for a healthy brain.
So if the microglia are like the security guards,
Yeah,
the astrocytes are like the maintenance crew, making sure everything runs smoothly.
I like that. That's a great way to put it. And just like we were talking about with the microglia, there's some evidence that COVID might be messing with astrocytes too.
Really? How so?
Well, remember how we were saying that inflammation seems to be at the root of a lot of these problems? Well, astrocytes are really, really sensitive to inflammation. Even small changes in their environment can throw them off.
So it's like a chain reaction.
Hmm.
The virus triggers this inflammatory cascade, and it disrupts not just the microglia, but also these astrocytes, these crucial support cells.
Exactly. And when astrocytes aren't functioning properly, well, it can have a ripple effect throughout the brain. It can affect how neurons communicate, how memories are formed, all sorts of things.
Wow, it really drives home just how interconnected everything in the brain is,
Yeah.
and how disruption in one area can have these widespread
Well, and
effects.
that's why it's so complex, but also so fascinating, right?
It is. Well, I think we've done some serious unpacking today. We've explored some cutting-edge research, learned about the amazing world inside our brains,
We've learned a lot.
and hopefully given our listeners a better understanding of what might be going on with brain fog after COVID-19.
It's been a pleasure, as always.
It's always great to have you. And for everyone listening, thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive. Keep those brains curious, and we'll see you next time.